meeting locked away.
Vaughan and Grant, did you want to check your sound before we did that?
Yes, good morning, Council TV. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Council TV? Thank you.
All right.
Yep, and this is the pilot. Thank you. I'm all good.
Okay, Carly, do you want to run the committee page?
All right. Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnei hui, ki te mana whenua rangitānei, he mihi nui, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Well, morning everyone, welcome to the Planning and Strategy Committee for the 9th of March, and we have got just about a full house, I think, online. So obviously our meeting is being recorded and all going to plan. We are currently live streaming to our YouTube channel as well. If councillors could please keep their cameras turned on but their microphones muted for the duration of the meeting, unless you're addressing the meeting. Please use the hand up function if you are wanting to ask a question or make a comment. And if you've got an amendment or an additional recommendation, could you please email that through to Sarah and Carly so we can capture that. So the recommendations for the meeting will be on the screen, and I'll read those out as well. We will be voting by raised hands, so I'll need your faces on the screen so we can actually capture your votes. And if there's any request for a division, please let us know. I think, the only other thing will be just a reminder around giving your name before speaking, just so that is captured for anybody watching. My plan is that we will try to break around 10. Or sometime after, where there's a bit of a natural gap, because we obviously will be needing to finish by, we should be finished by midday so that we can get to our next committee meeting at 1. So moving through our order of business, I haven't received any apologies. Is there any late apologies? Great. No notification of additional items. Cool. Are there any declarations of interest? Great. Moving on to item 4, public comment. We do have a public comment from Grant Higgins, who I see has just arrived into the meeting.
Apologies, I've only just got the invite, yeah.
Hi, Grant.
Yeah.
No worries. So we've just got to public comment, so it was great timing. Do you need a moment? Are you ready to go?
Oh yes. Look, I'm ready to go. This is about the street racing paper, is it?
Yeah. So you've got 3 minutes to make any comments you wish, and then there may be some questions following that. Our administrators will be keeping time, and we'll just signal into the chat function when your 3 minutes is concluded. And if you keep going, I'll probably cut you off. So no
problem. Well, my name's Grant Higgins. I'm from P&B Land Co. Look, I just wanted to say that the paper covers various options, but action's now required to take control of the street racing issue. From our point of view, the activity is illegal, and it's only a matter of time before someone's seriously injured or killed. We know it's an issue. Everyone knows it's an issue across the region. In terms of myself, I can speak to the observed behaviour at the North East Industrial Park, Bella Drive in particular. The gatherings happen every day from 3 p.m-ish and conclude early hours of the morning. Usually a dozen cars with more than 60 vehicles and crowds numbering over 100 about once a week. So it's a real issue. The activity culminates in burnouts, drifting, street racing. The noise is excessive. The crowd is intimidating. There's vandalism, littering, theft, graffiti. They're the observed behaviours. Businesses are disrupted and are thinking twice about Palmy as a location. They're all scared. The city has to act now, engage with the group on the short and long-term solution. We, PMB, have instigated security. We're doing that every night to understand the pattern. We're currently procuring cameras to further evidence and allow police to convict. The action is costly that we're doing and shouldn't really be our job. We currently call police and report the activity, but unfortunately the police are not resourced to act. We've got a business group and a resident group in the area. They're all fed up. We have their full support and they all request instant action. The street racers know their rights. They believe they have the right to do the activity on the public road. There's no control, no enforcement, and laws have been broken through those other things. Gating off the park is a short-term answer from our point of view, but at the same time, engagement with the group is required to solve the long-term solution. I'm guessing they want a place to congregate and go about their business. I'm sure the city can do this, and a club seems like a possible mechanism to do it. From my point of view, it's a tough issue, but we need instant action. We need to take control. And the paper at the moment, the street racing paper, doesn't take instant action to prevent harm. They're my words.
Thanks, Grant. I've got a question before we move to other councillors. The comment that you made around they want somewhere to go and you think that the council can help with that, are you referencing something like a skid pad?
I don't know what it is. I think we've got to speak with these guys. Look, I kind of made a breakthrough last night after being surrounded by 12 of them with crowbars in their hands and inside my car. Got a bit heated. Luckily, the security guard was there. I've managed to get a hold of 2 blokes, Chevy and Jordan. I've managed to organise a meeting with Mayor Smith, Craig Nash, myself, Greg Key, Jordan and Chevy. That's going to happen tomorrow night at 4:30 out at the park and find out what these guys want. They said to me they know their rights, they're allowed to be there, and they want somewhere to go, but they've been stonewalled by council. They've got a whole support and signatures, etc. Look, I don't know what the answer is, to be fair, but we've just got to talk with them first.
Okay, but the group obviously wants the council to provide a location for them to take in their hobby.
Maybe. They want to go somewhere. I don't know if it's council or who. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for coming and making time to come in and make this comment as well. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena, and good morning, Grant. Thanks for fronting up. And I understand it's been a really troubling time for you and the tenants out there, but also Works Road and other businesses around town. Actually, to be honest, residents as well, because there's the real noise issues. You talked about the gating off or the temporary gating off. Is it like Cliff Road, which goes up to Motuopoto, Anzac Park? Is that what you're talking about at night? Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
we need to get access in there for the businesses for fire and etc. And there's countdown up here. So my view is like Tidal Road up in Auckland. They've got some magnetic gates with PIN numbers that do open. It seems to be effective. That is an answer, but I think it's the location where you put that. That's the kind of gating, I think, Grant.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councillor Hapara.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Grant, for putting forward your views. Just one question from me. When you contact the police, how long does it take for them to get there, and have they responded to every time you've called, or haven't they responded? What is their response time being like?
Well, variable. When Wellington was going on, it was non-existent. When I've rung up, there's usually 20 people in the queue, so that doesn't work. But when we've had the security guard, we get it intermittently, I would say, or they've turned up probably 2 or 3 times.
Do you think that because you've got a security guard, they turn up more because you've put in your own security around it?
Yeah, for sure. I think the security gives the patterning. The guard sort of has a rapport with the guys now, so they get the patterning, yeah, for sure. I think that does help, but it doesn't always get the police there. The security guard had to intervene one time, which I wasn't happy about, because we kind of employ the security guard, which puts me in a difficult position if he gets, health and safety wise, if he gets into trouble.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Grant. Thanks for your work.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Grant, for your comment. I was interested to hear you say that the police aren't resourced for this kind of thing. Can you just tell me how you've come to that conclusion?
Well, when a car caught on fire because they were doing burnouts, the police didn't turn up, but in the wisdom of the security guard, in today's society, you ring the fire department and they turned up and put the car out. What if it was a police matter straight away?
Okay, so it's based on your experience of their response to the illegal activity rather than anything you've been told?
Yeah. Dead right.
Okay.
They're just not. They're not there instantly.
Okay. And I mean, do you see that the solution to this is solely in the hands of council, or because that seemed to be some of the sort of messaging that I was hearing just now?
Well, it's a council road. If it was a private road, someone else owns it. So at the moment, it's a council road, and council controls it. So they know that. So yes.
Okay. But council isn't responsible for enforcing law and order. So I'm not quite sure how you come to that conclusion.
Yeah, okay. So law and order, if there's a law being broken, then it's a police matter, isn't it? But the police aren't driving. We're kind of policing it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Grant, can I just ask, in regards to the issue of either police not turning up or police not responding appropriately, have you taken that any higher? Have you spoken to, the local MP or contacted the Minister for Police or anything, or were you looking more for a local response?
Goodness me, how long? Yeah, no, I haven't contacted the local MP. I've got weekly meetings with instigated by Grant with Phil Ward, but no, I haven't been to any higher levels. To be fair, I can't wait that long. Someone's going to get hurt. I need to do something now.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Grant. Yeah, and thanks very much for just taking the time to actually just coming to make a presentation. But I just wanted to perhaps just move the conversation aside a little bit. Just do you have any sort of suggestions around what we might be able to do in terms of road surfacing?
Yep. Look, I think these guys here, we need to think like them. That's why having this meeting will be important. These guys here that kind of instigate this have a skid pad, so anything that's smooth, even if it's grippy, they'll still skid it up. So my view is that you've got to create undulating things, or ruts, like mill-out ruts. So something that's kind of like a gravel road would probably be all right, but that's not sufficient. So we've got to do something that's not smooth in the interim and probably temporarily restrict their behaviour. But the best answer is to gate it.
Okay. Yeah. So the so either the milling or the speed humps, they need to an appropriate design, right?
Yeah, probably, or some urban design that restricts it. But you know, if you gate it and control it, then you know that that's the answer straight away.
Okay. Okay, and just want to seek a comment from you, just in terms of like this perhaps suggestion that a skid pan might be an appropriate response. How do we kind of sort of mitigate the issues of noise in particular? Like these people have actually got to get from A to B to actually get to the skid pan, so that then also may create an additional problem. So any comments on that, please?
No. Look, cars I suppose have to be warranted, etc. So that's probably the answer of them travelling from A to B. At a venue, yep, I understand that, not in my backyard. Everyone understands that, but at the moment they're in everyone's backyard. They just choose, they're pretty agile. So one location that they control, my view is you would probably put containers there that confine the noise. From my experience, Pat, that's not from a skid experience, from a construction experience, mind you. So I think that's the answer. I see they've done that up at Mary skid pan, and that's in the middle of kind of nowhere, but I think that works.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Grant.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Grant. Just reading into it, your approach here today is not just raising your concerns around the police response, around law and order, but more a whole of community response to support you. But therefore, I'd ask the question, if the gate's a solution in the Northeast Industrial, I'd imagine that the group would just disperse to another part of the city.
Yep.
And would have a need for another gate or another something. What's your comment around just like, well done on the engagement, the initial engagement, but what as a whole of community response to actually get an overall solution? Your comments on that, please.
Overall solution, yeah. Well, thanks for that. And I'm just working at the short term because we've got a tenant coming, and we're building it currently, so it is a real issue for us. Concerned about that, so that's why I've been pretty active about it. The whole term solution, I think, is, and we'll get a sense tomorrow night, but I'm pretty sure they just want somewhere to go. And that, I believe, is a skid pan that is not on the street. So then I think that solves. I'm not saying it's going to totally solve it, because I'm sure there's some people, there's a minority that still want thrill to break the law. But if we got at least 50% of them, or even 2/3 of them, to somewhere, I think they might self-manage the outliers, is probably my gut feeling. And I think if you can get the numbers down in terms of just policing the outliers, I think that would be easier.
Thank you. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor McCallard.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Grant, for your presentation. And I think one of my questions was asked by Councillor Dennison already. But I just have one question. You mentioned earlier that, you know, providing a skid pad might go a long way in solving this issue. Are you also aware that this sort of situation happened in Christchurch, where a skid pad was provided to boy racers, but that didn't really solve the issue at all?
No, I'm not aware of that, but it's also happened in St. Louis, and it's all around the world. So, yeah, it's a worldwide issue, not just New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
But I think talking with these people to try and get a conversation and an agreement on if something is done and it isn't used, what the consequences would be a good start. So, yes, we don't want to create something that doesn't solve it. So conversation, I think, needs to be serious, and these young guys are smart. We need to get something written and agreed that deals with that situation, so it doesn't happen like that, like you say.
Mm-hmm. And so, just to, based on what you've just answered, do you think that having a conversation with them will go a long way in also fixing the issue?
Oh, yeah, man.
Okay.
Got to talk to people. We can't be in our offices. Jeez, got to talk with them. It's our job. They're smart people. One of them's one works. They obviously work to fund their hobby. Another one's studying. The guy that studies got more access to the park, and he's out there all the time, and he reckons he can control it. So talk with the guy. Let's find out what they want and see if they can manage their own group.
No, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, Grant, for sharing your views with us, and just wanted to explore a little bit further around the skid pad options. And that it sounds like you've been doing some thinking there. Do you have a view around whether that should be seen as a sort of user pay model, or whether that should be seen as a community good that would be provided through public funds?
Look, if you went round, it'd have to be a community thing, because you need. I mean, if they're not here at their park, they're down at Longburn, or they're in Hokowhitu, or they're at Ashurst. It's a community thing.
Right, so you'd prefer to see it provided for free to anybody that wanted to come and use it?
Well, if we want to solve it, isn't that the answer?
Just trying to get your views. Thank you.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, Grant, for coming and talking to us today. I was just wondering, in terms of the people that you're speaking to, I guess, tomorrow night, how do you know that they have the influence to be able to change everybody else's sort of behaviour? Like, if you come to some sort of agreement with those two, how do you know that would be it, and then, you know, everything will be, I guess, fine in terms of, otherwise you might end up having a whole group of other people who just do the same thing if these people move out.
Right. So I don't know if these guys have a criminal element or not, and I don't want to really comment on that, because there is talk of there's criminal elements somewhere, again, a policing issue, but I would be saying to them, okay, guys, where are all the names of your group? They reckon they've got a petition that they've signed and put to council that's been stonewalled. I would ask for the list of all the people and their names and their car registrations, etc., on their group, so we actually get a handle on the numbers. If you're getting up to, 100, 150, 200 vehicles there, I think we've got it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Grant. My question is actually from the Madam Chair, because Grant has described it a couple of times that they have put a petition or prepared a petition. Have we received any petition of this kind?
I have never seen or heard of a petition from this group. So if there has been a level of engagement that is gone directly to officers, that there could well be something that they may deem a petition, but certainly there has not been a petition presented to elected members or a formal petition received by the council.
Thank you.
I mean, obviously, Grant, who's made the public comment, has referenced a meeting he's got with the group and the mayor tomorrow, I think he said, and so I'm sure the mayor can pass that on, or at least explain to them the process if they do wish to bring a petition to the council, because certainly we haven't received a formal petition.
Yeah, well, we'll find out more about what that is, but that's what they said last night, is the crowbars were in front of my face. So there we go. Fresh.
Thanks, Grant. That concludes the public comment now. So again, thank you for making time to come and speak with us this morning.
No problems. Okay.
So we'll now need to receive the public comment, and so I will move that the committee receive public comment for information, seconded by Councillor Hancock. Thank you. So I'll just remind councillors, we do have this item on our agenda as well, so you might like to save comments for that point in time, but you do have the right to make a comment now if there is anyone wanting to make a comment. Great, so I will invite you to vote with a show of hands. All in favour? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Sorry, Vaughan, was that an opposition hand or just a slower hand? You're on mute.
I was for the recommendations.
Thank you for that clarification. That has passed unanimously. Right, moving on to the minutes. So we've got the minutes from the 9th of February meeting, and I'll move that the minutes of the Planning and Strategy Committee meeting of 9 February 2022, Part 1 Public, be confirmed as a true and correct record, seconded by Councillor Hancock. Thank you. Are there any comments on the minutes? Right, with no comments, I'll invite you to vote. All in favour? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Abstention from Vaughan, thank you, Councillor Dennison. And that has carried. Is everyone on the meeting? 15 in favour and 1 abstention. I'm assuming everyone's on the meeting, sorry, I haven't checked that. Right, moving on to item 6. We've got options to address street racer issues. Councillors, this is on page 13. We've got Julie McDonald, Strategy and Policy Manager, who is going to present this. And I believe, Julie, you've got a great presentation for us. So you can just get into that when you're ready.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. I'll just share the presentation with you. I talk really fast, so it won't take long. So everyone can see that? So this reports in response to the resolution through the Strategy and Planning Committee last year that the Chief Executive investigate the antisocial and street racer activity occurring at various locations on the outskirts of Palmerston North and provide advice on the various options Council could pursue to address the problem. Thanks to the police and infrastructure staff, as well as local residents and businesses for their assistance in making this report. Unfortunately, Inspector Ross Grantham and Senior Sergeant Phil Ward are unavailable to be here today. We do have Elliot Marson from CR Law, Chris Lai and Sandra King, both available. In between us, we'll do our best to answer the questions that I'm sure you have. So while the report's about Council's response to the issue more generally, there's a brief update on what's happened at Works Road, which kicked off this report in the first place. Elected members will be well aware that in February there was a serious incident where a police officer was injured. Rubber speed humps were installed in January, but they were illegally removed very quickly after installation, and AC speed humps were installed in February. The design hasn't deterred activity. Chris is available later to provide more detail about the design reasons for that, should that information be of interest to you. As the report notes, there are frequent call-outs to police to locations throughout the city and the region, and we've heard about one of those examples today. Many cities and regions throughout the country and internationally have tried to address the problems identified, and there are lots of different potential responses ranging from more enforcement, various deterrents, more regulation, and they've met with various success. There is no one answer to this problem. So to assess the options available to respond, we've developed a series of criteria: whether the option could be implemented under law, whether it's practical, whether it will work, whether it's effective, how long it will last, how applicable it is to other locations, how quickly it could be implemented, and also whether it avoids other adverse effects for the community. I'd like to briefly mention some options not considered. The first is alternative activities for street races. Some areas have developed burnout pads or variations over the past several decades, really. This option wasn't considered here because those initiatives usually come from the drivers themselves, so it's interesting to hear that there may be one such a proposal around. I'm certainly not aware of it. Assessment of a theoretical proposal wouldn't be particularly helpful. The second is more enforcement. This is outside Council's control, and there isn't a need for Council decision for that to occur. Information sharing and communication between the police and Council is a given, and it's not a new option needing a Council decision. And lastly, there are various roading treatments, and there may be good options for Council to investigate. Staff are already looking at options actively as resources allow. So the next slide is to give you an idea of the complexity involved in assessing the options without looking at too much detail. So along the top of the options, down the side are the criteria. You can see there's no clear winner and lots of question marks. There's nothing that ticks all the boxes that's really obvious, and if there were, then everybody around the country would have fixed this by now. So I'm just going to go through each of the options in turn very quickly. So the first option is to amend the existing traffic and parking bylaw to restrict access to specified roads or parts of roads by imposing restrictions allowed under the Land Transport Act. For example, some councils have restricted access to named locations for light vehicles within specified hours. So this option is supported through recommendations 5 and 6. If this option is approved, then the bylaw process would need to proceed. Restrictions on Works Road or any other road can't be achieved without the bylaw review process through this mechanism. This review would include identifying issues, areas of concern in addition to Works Road. Option 2 is to develop a cruising bylaw, and this was discussed a fair bit in the initial discussion at committee. This option isn't supported. In summary, it's not a feasible or effective solution to the problem identified at Works Road. As the report notes, the problem behaviour identified at the moment doesn't meet the definition of cruising under the Land Transport Act. If the traffic and parking bylaw is reviewed, though, cruising could still emerge as an issue. Option 3 is to restrict parking within a specified location, in this instance Works Road, as allowed by the existing parking provisions in the current bylaw. For example, no parking or limitation on hours for parking on all or part of Works Road. So this option is supported, recommendations 2 and 3. This would provide another enforcement tool for police, and that is supported by them. Efficacy would depend on the provision of signage and enforcement, obviously, and it could be extended to other places in the city. We'd note in the report that while it could be extended, a greater response than perhaps 2 locations a year would require additional budget. Option 4 is temporarily close Works Road. This option is not supported. Temporary road closure is a mechanism available to council involving considerable cost and practical difficulty to apply on each occasion as warranted. There's significant detail about this option in the report, and it might be something that Elliot needs to answer questions on if you want to inquire about that. Option 5 is permanent road closure. The Local Government Act enables the council to permanently stop a road or part of a road. Where a road's stopped, it has to be transferred into private ownership. This option would potentially result in a less effective operation of the overall transport system, and it's a relatively extreme measure, particularly if you're talking about multiple locations in a city. Option 6A, this is the first of the infrastructure responses, so the installation of speed humps. This option is supported. As you've heard, speed humps have already been installed within current budgets. Recommendation 7 proposes additional budget to enable similar treatment elsewhere where they're the appropriate treatment, and that's something that Chris may be able to provide advice on if you're interested. And option 6B is the second physical deterrence surface treatments. This isn't supported at this time. It's considered that high friction surface might not make a noticeable difference to users and is unlikely to be a deterrent. Staff are, however, continuing to investigate the various surface treatment options. So just finally, the recommendations are multiple and complex, which is why I've done a wee presentation. So the first is to amend the traffic and parking bylaw to restrict access to specified locations by imposing restrictions allowed under the Land Transport Act. That's option 1. Also to endorse the parking restriction response already available, which is option 3. And also to endorse and approve resources to enable speed humps at other locations if appropriate, and that's option 6A. So that's the end of the presentation, and as I said, there are a multitude of staff and others available to answer questions, and I understand Phil Ward may now be available as well.
Thank you, Julie. We do have Phil online, and so there may be questions. Phil, did you want to make any comment before we go into questions?
Just to apologise for being late. We've had all sorts of technical issues over at the police station, so I actually come to the council and has been kind enough to sign me in. So thank you very much, and it's great to be here. But what I would say, looking at the proposals, is that we absolutely endorse Julie's recommendations. It certainly provides us with a lot of opportunities that we haven't currently got at the moment in our toolkit, both in terms of prevention and enforcement, and it could make a significant difference in changing behaviours that we're currently seeing as part of that street racer fraternity.
Okay, thank you. We do have a number of questions. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Julie. Just regarding bringing in or amending the law or bringing a new bylaw, I guess from the previous presentation, what we understand the problem is actually implementing the law. The police, we are told that police doesn't have resources to tackle all this. So when you are creating a new bylaw, who will be implementing that? And the problem will still be there.
So I think that raises a really good question, is that there are two things here. One is that the activities that are already against the law, so sustained loss of traction, the wee terminology that we've all learned, is already against the law. However, in discussion with the police, it seems that the more minor ability, all minor infringements, I suppose, the ability for police to say that something is not allowed. So, for example, access by light vehicles within certain hours is the way that some councils have gone about limiting access, would provide police with another tool in their toolbox to try and enforce. So there are the two things. One is the things that are already criminal and that are a police resource in question, and that's probably a question for Phil. And the other is whether there are any mechanisms that council can extend to enable the police to do more enforcement. So none of those things involve more council enforcement.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And thanks, Julie, for the presentation and the report. I guess my question's along the same lines as Councillor Butt. So, you know, breaching a bylaw and getting a $40 to $60 fine, which, you know, we would then have to pay court costs to take it to court if they didn't pay. When my understanding is many young people rack up, you know, thousands of dollars worth of unpaid driving offence fines. I just don't see how that's. How do we genuinely envisage that that's going to be a deterrent?
I'm not sure who the best person is to answer that question. It may be, I mean, as the report states, there are higher penalties for the bylaw option. I might ask Elliot to make a comment about that, if that's okay. Perhaps the cost rather than the how can we part. No.
We can see Elliot on screen, but we can't hear you. We might, we'll come back to you in a moment, Elliot. You can work your sound out. Lorna, Councillor Johnson, did you have any other questions?
Well, no, but I don't really think that this is just a legal answer. This is the same problem that we've come across in other respects when we've looked at bringing in bylaws, is that you can have a bylaw, but how do you enforce it? I suppose what I'd be interested to know is whether we'd be expecting our staff to enforce the bylaw, or would this be something we'd be expecting police to enforce?
So I can answer that. My understanding is that in conversation with the police are keen to have some more tools. No, we're not envisaging that parking wardens will be heading out to any of these locations under cover of darkness. That's not the intention here. What the police are suggesting is that they have insufficient tools, because at the moment merely arriving on site or parking or being in the location is not an offence, and so they're requesting that those things potentially become offences so that they have something to enforce. Your point about how effective that will be as a deterrent, I think, is probably one of my question marks on my little speckly diagram, in that, you know, as other councils have found, often a multitude of options are required and may still not be fully effective.
Okay, so in that case, if I could, Madam Chair, if we could have a question to the police about whether or not they have the resources to enforce these bylaws, should we bring them in? I don't know if Phil's able to answer that.
I certainly have, and I can tell you that we certainly do have the resources to enforce it. One thing operationally is when you have a multitude of cars, in excess of 100 cars at a time parking up at one site, and perhaps where the activity, the boy racer activity is taking place is right at the end of those cars. It's very difficult for police staff and unsafe for police staff to go into that environment. So what this provides for us is the ability to start enforcement from the outside in, instead of sending staff into that environment, which of course recently we've had an officer assaulted and a member of the public stabbed out at Longburn. So what this provides for us is a technical strategy to deal with supporters, to deal with those hangers-on that are part of this group that turn up to watch and encourage those doing the illegal activity.
Yes, thank you. I'll just leave it there. I know others are in the queue.
Councillor Johnson, did you still want your question answered by Elliot from earlier?
Yes, I'm interested to know what the potential cost is to council of needing to enforce fines that we might either the police or us might issue under any new bylaw, because I think that that's an important consideration before we decide whether or not to use that tool.
Sure. Elliot, are you still online? How's your sound? No. Perhaps you might be able to provide a written response if the sound isn't working. Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie, what I'm wanting to know is once we put these bylaws in to restrict parking and access, will we be paying for a lot of signage?
So as the report says repeatedly, probably excessively, signage is an issue, because obviously anybody who is in breach of a bylaw needs to have a reasonable opportunity to know they're in breach of a bylaw. Signage is potentially something that needs to be worked through. Chris might be able to speak to this, but it would depend, for example, with the non-bylaw option of parking, which is already available to infrastructure, it may be that there's a solution devised that requires, for example, on-road signage rather than signs that could be knocked over with a car, for instance. Could I ask Chris to perhaps comment on that?
Good morning, councillors. My name's Chris Lee, Activity Manager of Transport. In terms of what we can do in terms of parking restrictions, there is just your standard parking signs, or we could do something like line marking. Those are essentially the two options. The line marking is a bit more robust in the fact that it's harder to remove. It's only if it gets covered up by dirt. But there'll be needing annual maintenance to it as well. The problem with line marking, such as broken yellow lines, is that it restricts all parking at all times. So if a business needs parking on street, then it's not going to be able to access that legally. And as Julie mentioned, if for any signs, we need to make sure that the signs is spaced appropriately. So there is a limit to the length in which signs need. There's a maximum distance you can have them separated. But if signs do go missing and they're too far apart, then it can make it difficult to enforce.
I suppose I'm aware of all the signage, but my issue is around the budgets. We've allowed 30,000 and 50,000 for 6A, but have you really, like if they start ripping out signs, which, I mean, they've dug up the other things that we tried to put in place. I mean, it doesn't seem to me that the budget that we've got, I mean, what has that allowed for in signage?
I can't recall exactly what we put, but essentially a new sign and a pole to be installed is about $250 each to council. So depending on how many signs, you might space one every 50 to 100 metres. So you can kind of work out a rate through that.
So I suppose, so the one-off cost for setting up the signage thereafter, if we pass all this, would be how much? Are we talking 5,000 or 10,000 for the setup?
Can I just jump in there? It depends on what all this is, because obviously a bylaw process would go through, determine the locations and determine the kind of restriction there would be. So depending on the kind of restriction there was, would then lead to the right kind of signage and so forth. So for example, one council that I spoke to has area signs. They've got particular areas where you enter, and it's got rules about that. So those sorts of signs are different from the, every few metres kinds of signs. So I think while we've done a best guess in terms of the parking restrictions which are already available, any future signage or infrastructure that would be the outcome of restrictions through a bylaw is really still to be determined, because we'd have to go through the bylaw process first to see what restrictions we wanted.
Okay, thank you. That answers. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. Just talking to a few of the old boy racers, and one of the things that one of them suggested to me was, why don't the council put bitumen with very heavy chip down, which makes it impossible to do burnouts because it rips the tyres to shreds? Have we looked at that at all? Does anyone know from roading?
I could.
Good morning. Good morning,
sorry,
Councillor. Yeah, I will just introduce this. We have been doing some research in this space. We're still researching it. Chris has got some information he can share about what he's found out from overseas. We have been looking at a product from Glenbrook Steel Mill, a slag product that the State Highway Network use for high friction surfacing. It's very, very expensive and generally used on a straight run. Turning frictions are a problem, it strips. So we're still investigating what we can use. There are some products locally we're also looking at. But Chris, can you have a talk about what you found out from overseas?
So I've been in touch with some of my old colleagues in Melbourne. He was able to reach out to some of the councils about seeing if there has been anything done in high friction surfacing. One of the councils out there was Hume City Council. They did something in 2016 or 17, where they looked at 5 industrial areas or industrial courtpoles and applied high friction surfacing. Yeah, I think the police, they found that it was effective. However, the surfacing only lasted for 4 to 5 years. Over that time, the surface worn down, and that was largely due to the heavy vehicles driving over it and ripping them while they're turning into properties and into the courtpoles. So it ended up being quite a costly exercise for them, and they've made the decision not to continue that surfacing throughout their part of the city. And so once the surfacing was kind of deteriorated, they found that the boy race activity returned back. Many of the other councils that were contacted weren't considering it as an option, just due to the cost and the expected life, and just also due to the sheer size of the industrial areas. It wasn't a cost-effective solution for them, and they thought other means were working with the police was probably the next best option to resolve the issues.
Thank you for those answers, Chris and Sandra King, Group Manager of Transport and Development. Councillor Hapeta.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Julie, for the report. Just a couple of quick questions. Just going back to the submitter who gave public comment, he mentioned 2 things. One was around having communication with the group. I wondered if council had communication with the group.
No, and as is described in the report, I think that is a limitation of the work that's been done so far. So the recommendation, the resolution and the work that was initiated by councillors in October was really to look at mechanisms available to council. As you'd understand, this was an additional piece of work to the normal work program, so there are some resource constraints on just how much time and energy could go into this. I do think that, as I've said through the discussion of potentially reviewing the bylaw or looking at any other longer term options that council wants to investigate. Obviously, engagement with the street racer community would be important. I mean, other places around the country have found that sometimes there is a group that coalesces and that they can communicate with. Other times there are, as I think has already been mentioned today, different groups. There's opportunistic activity, and then there's more organised activity. So that's a significant undertaking.
Okay. Second question, Julie, was around. He put a suggestion up about gates. I just wanted to know what your view was on the gate suggestion.
So it's going to depend a little bit on what the intention of that proposal is. So the report goes into some detail about the logistics and the legal issues with road closure, which is I think what we're talking about here. So my understanding, and I'm sorry if Elliot's only able to wave his arms rather than speak to this, but my understanding is that any time a road is temporarily closed, there needs to be a case made that for the requirement for that road closure. So we couldn't, for example, say we're going to close X road every weekend through summer. Each occasion that the road is closed needs to have a case made. So there's a legal barrier to doing that temporarily. If we're talking about permanent road closure, as I outlined in the options, that's a whole other thing, and basically means the road goes into private ownership. There are obviously lots of issues to work through there, including where there are multiple owners of the road, which bit of the road, all those sorts of things, some of which the submitter this morning spoke to.
So North Industrial Park, is that a private road or a public road?
My understanding is we're talking about the public road.
Okay.
David may want to talk to that in more detail.
It's El Prado Drive, and all the roads that come off it are a public road.
Okay, so Elliot still can't speak, Madam Chair?
Is that working now?
It's working.
Yes. Oh,
welcome.
Sorry. Yes, so to address the question about temporary road closure, there would need to be a case made in each particular instance to utilise the provisions under the Land Transport Act. But also in terms of practicality, we were looking at Works Road, for instance, and the concern was that if you close that road, they're going somewhere else and there's additional cost elsewhere. To address Councillor Johnson's question about the bylaw, so yes, you would have to be enforcing the fines, whether that's through a court procedure, but the Land Transport Act actually provides authority for the police to impound vehicles if there's breaches of qualifying bylaws. So in the bylaw response, you'd be looking at utilising that provision as well. So there's a warning mechanism, and then if the particular driver breaches that warning, the police have an ability to impound the vehicle. And I think in general terms, to address the query about why are we just adding an additional law when there's an additional existing legal mechanisms, I think the concern from police, as I understand it, is that the existing law is a little bit difficult to enforce, because by the time that they would go on site and there are cars that are losing traction, the group is a bit too large and there might be risks with enforcing that. And so a bylaw gives them an opportunity to attend the site at an early stage, and it's a bit easier for them to enforce. I think the police might be able to comment on that, but that's our general understanding.
I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Habitat. Phil, did you want to provide any follow-up comment to what Elliot's responded with?
I think Elliot summed it up nicely. It's probably done a better job than what I was explaining earlier on. But one of the problems that we are facing regularly is by the time we're called to boy racer or street racer activity, there's already a large volume of cars and crowd congregated. So this was talking about the prevention opportunities that this provides us is to target those sites earlier on, to run an engage and education and encouraging people so they're aware of what's going on before we use the infringement notices as an enforcement tool, and just try and change the behaviour and the culture of that group. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, colleagues, for covering off lots of the questions. I suppose what I'm left with, so we've heard about prevention and enforcement. I think my questions are about redirection of activity or providing alternatives. So I'm recognising that this isn't a Palmerston North problem. That came across strongly in the report and in the comment that this is, international. So I wondered, Julie, if in your discussions, have we connected with, say, MDC or any other neighbouring authorities around this? What's their experience, and have they any alternative solutions? Bearing in mind that we do have a motorsport hub next door, and I know there's some work has gone on in that space with young drivers to provide alternative activities. So I'm just wondering if there's anything in the alternative space that we could add into the mix here.
Phil may wish to comment on this because obviously the police have a region which covers several local authorities. My understanding is that MDC aren't addressing this particularly at the moment. I'm not sure about other neighbouring authorities. I mean, different councils around the country have sometimes engaged with groups and gone some ways to providing alternatives. It depends a little on whether you start with the illegal behaviour, in which case councils don't normally get into the business of providing alternative options for illegal behaviour, or whether you see it as a recreational pursuit. And I guess it's a really complicated issue in that there are aspects of it which are something to do and, a recreational element. Whether you would classify it completely as a motorsport, I'm not quite sure. So it's really complex, and I think that's why the councils that have tried to provide alternatives, or at least facilitate alternatives, have done so upon approach from racers themselves. I guess there would be no incentive to seek an alternative unless it wasn't really easy to go currently to the locations. We have lovely wide roads in Palmerston North, and if I was so inclined, I'd be taking my Prius out there and doing that too. But they're really attractive locations for that activity, and it's just part of the environment we're living in.
I'm excited to see you and your Prius doing burnouts.
I know. Okay. I have declined.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to colleagues that have covered a lot of the territory. Just a couple questions left. I understand that the bylaws are an additional tool for the police to use in their response. My question's around parking fines. Is that a tool that as well the police are using, or is that something we're expecting our officers to be involved with?
So normally that is something that council enforces, as you're aware. In this instance, this is an option that the police support, and that they would see that they would enforce. I mean, police can enforce bylaws, but that they would see that that would be their role, and there's an undertaking from Inspector Grantham that would be the case.
Great, thank you. Couple questions in the infrastructure space. One is noting that we haven't yet got an effective speed bump installation at Works Road. Do we have a design that sort of hits that sweet spot between being sufficiently deterrent but still meeting the needs of the businesses in terms of access?
Good morning, councillors. Acting GM Transport and Development, Sandra King. Yes, we're working with a gentleman out at Works Road to look at the sweet spot. So the issue with we've got the good layout there. The issue is the height of the hump. So we're looking at how we can raise it now to try and defer the activity that's happening.
Great, thank you. And just on the idea around gates, I understand there's some legal concerns and some cost concerns, etc. setting those aside, if we were to say, you know, a gate across El Prado Drive, how long would it take to actually implement that sort of gate with pin access that was being described elsewhere?
I don't have an answer to that, and we'd have to come back to you. It depends on the design, the materials, how we're going to source it, if it's electronic, where the power supply will be. There's a whole range of issues we need to need to do some research on that in terms of supply market, installation. I guess you're looking at something similar that's been put out at Te Awanui for the build of the new road. There's some electronic gates out there as well. So we've got some local areas we can look at, but we'll have to investigate further.
Thank you. That's it for me, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, again, thanks to colleagues for lots of questions, some of which have already been covered. I just want to go back to the issue of these high friction surfaces and just get some comment on that. Is that when you look at page 28, I think, of the report, it actually gives some costings which look quite expensive. As part of our investigations into high friction surfaces, have we considered actually using high friction surface alongside traditional surfaces so we could create an uneven driver experience in terms of more friction, no friction, more friction, no friction, so that it makes it unattractive for people to actually use these areas as skid pans?
That's a very good question, Councillor Hancock. No, not specifically in terms of the pattern, but something that we can look into and take on further.
Okay, and we also heard from Grant Higgins earlier on just around road channeling. So in other words, instead of having a protrusion above the road surface, actually building something into the below the road surface. Have we looked at that as an option as well?
We are considering that at the moment. We have a discussion with Grant this afternoon to talk about the layout we've got prepared for Valor, to engage with them to check feasibility, and we'll be talking to them about humps and hollows rather than humps. So we'll need to make sure if we're doing hollows that can drain, we're protecting the pavement, and we're not going to create a problem that's going to destroy the pavement as well with the heavy freight. So. Okay,
thank you. And the last question really is just around, Grant also talked about an Auckland industrial area there where they have put in a gated option. I didn't catch the name of the area, but have we included that as part of our investigation? Yeah, I suppose what I'm trying to get to here is that the paper tells us that there are some legal obligations on council if we are going to either temporarily or permanently close a road. So I really want to understand that if other TLAs are able to do that, how have they managed to circumvent that obligation?
If I could answer that, I'm not aware of that one in Auckland, so that is an area that we'd have to look into further if this is an option to be pursued in terms of gating off a public road.
Okay.
And how they've gone about it.
Yeah, thank you. So I suppose my last question really is we've got a whole range of options, I guess, that are under exploration at the moment. And we have a paper which is in a certain state at the current time. So what kind of time frame might we expect to actually get some definitive answers around some of the things which I've asked?
I'm sorry, I'm unclear as to what you're referring to. Are you talking about the ongoing investigations of surface treatments?
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
so
to answer that.
Yeah.
We could probably look within the next couple of months, try and pull together some information that gives us some clear guidance in this area. That's a best guess.
Great, thanks, Sandra. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lots of questions on this one, obviously a bit of a hot topic. Thanks, Julie, for quite a detailed report and obviously quite a bit of work. Look, I just want to explore where Councillor Hancock was going to around page 23 and that temporarily closing off roads. Is this more of a desktop study? Because I note the comments are pretty brief, but I understand that there are some legal issues.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Okay. I mean, we've set precedents in other parts of New Zealand and like Tidal Road, Industrial Park in Auckland, Cliff Road, ourselves here in Palmerston North, where we close the road off every night. And Councillor Hancock, I think, was part of that in his former career. And also Te Apiti, where the new road's going up, it closes every night as well. So I just wonder, is this a desktop study, or do you have really detailed understanding of all those other situations?
If I can try and answer what I understand to be your question, that the report sets out the legal questions which they will need to be answered for council to proceed with any action in any of the locations of concern. So, for example, colloquially saying, let's close the road every night is not a legal thing to do. So that's why this report seeks to go through and provide advice to council about the options that are available. The difficulty, as Sandra has alluded to, with comparison to other parts of the country or other locations, is that things like ownership, whether there are multiple owners for a start, the issues that have been identified and the reason and the mechanisms used to close off that road are all unique. And so that if there was an inclination to look at that particular remedy in any of these particular places, that would require extensive additional work. What this report seeks to do is provide a framework of the options available.
So our submitter this morning, and I believe he's sent it to officers, is all the data around the Boy Racer activity every day. Is that not a reason to temporarily close a road that night? And if that data continues to come, is this like a special district licensing, like a special liquor license, where you've got to keep renewing it all the time?
I might ask Elliot to comment again. I mean, I think that the report goes into this issue in quite a lot of detail, but if Elliot can help provide some more clarification on that, then that would be helpful. I've had no communication on the submitter this morning.
Yes, I think there might be maybe talking at cross purposes about legal closure versus the use of the some sort of gate or something. I'm not necessarily sure whether legal closure, which is referred to under the LGA, is the same as that, and the bollard or the gate might be a road controlling authority power, which I guess is something that would need to be looked into. But in terms of the legal closure under the LGA, temporary legal closure, the standard that needs to be met is public disorder, and so I guess if there is evidence of that in any particular given case, then that legal mechanism could be used, but there needs to be a corresponding physical obstruction, and that would be a road controlling authority issue.
Okay, so Elliot, sorry, a couple more questions, Madam Chair. So Elliot, while I've got you there, you've heard the submitter, you've probably seen some police reports, and hopefully you've seen the data that's been collected. Would you not think there is public disorder and this is just not a couple of kids skidding up on the road?
I haven't seen the police reports or the data, but from what the submitter has described, then yes, I mean, it seems on the face of it that it would meet that public disorder criteria. But again, it's while you have the legal closure, there needs to be a corresponding physical closure for that to be effective. And I think that's the reason at that stage why that option wasn't selected.
Okay. And just, are you aware, we talk about different situations, but we've got one in our own city, or a couple actually, and they're both, my understanding, they're both public roads unless they've moved into somebody's other ownership. Cliff Road is closed every night by council staff physically. Is that not a public road? And do you know the background to how the legislation has allowed that to happen? Is it public disorder?
I am not aware of those instances, but I guess that's something that we can look into.
All right. No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Just one comment, sorry, on Cliff Road. It is a relatively unique road and quite different to El Prado Road and Works Road in that the only property which is accessed from Cliff Road is Te Motua Potua, which is council owned. So I suspect there's been and Sandra may want to comment, I'm not sure whether you're aware of the background, but I suspect there's been a slightly risky approach from council in terms of the legal processes followed to close that road, and that we've taken some risk knowing that ultimately the only person or landowner that has access to that road is the council with the reserve, which is quite different to a temporary closure and gating a couple of industrial precincts where there's a variety of owners and operators, a requirement for police and fire and those sorts of people to be able to access the road.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't realise I was going to get another officer comment. So can I just ask another question of the officer? So, David, you know the area as well, so I'm talking to the converted a little bit there. Do you not think a PIN entry and exit, as I understand Te Apiti for Waka Kotahi use for staff to access their gated off area, could that work?
Again, is that a public road or a private road?
My understanding, it's public, as far as what taxpayers would consider it public.
Is that the old Gorge Road?
Yes, no, not the Gorge, up. It's where the NZTA offices are. If you haven't been there.
Again, I'd be interested in understanding the detail of what.
Okay, it's just an example. My question was, do you think a PIN access? Because you stated that you don't think people get in and out, and I just asked the question of officers: would PIN access enable fire, the essential services and the tenants to access it?
If I could just...
Sorry, go, Julie.
No, yeah, I was just going to add, perhaps if you follow me, David, that I just wanted to make the comment that there have been discussions about, particularly, for example, at Works Road, where there's 24-hour access required by trucks. And so the mechanism itself does become very important. I know, for example, that that site is really large, and so there need to be some discussions about at what point the entry was controlled. Because, for instance, I know that there have been cases where truck drivers have felt intimidated accessing the properties that they're already getting access to. So things like, would there be an opportunity for people to gather around and follow through a gate? These are the sorts of things that have come up in the discussions about any kind of closing mechanisms, and so those safety concerns and the actual infrastructure mechanism are important to consider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We got a bit off topic, but thank you.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are probably gone, but they're just a couple of questions. Julie, if we followed through the recommendations here, how long before the bylaw would actually be in action that the police could use it?
The timeframes are stated in the report. A bylaw of
December, there's things there end of December. So is that looking like the earliest it'd be in place?
No, it would be longer than that. A bylaw review takes at least a year, and because of the various close down periods and the election period this year, we probably have a bit more of a delay than that. So the bylaw mechanism, which is one of the recommendations, would be a longer term solution, as I've pointed out.
Okay, thank you. That just covers that. There's nothing instant in that. And my second one would probably be for the police. Is not unlawful gathering or unlawful assembly at the moment a law?
it certainly is a law, but it will depend on the nature of the group and what they're doing as far as their behaviour goes. So what's quite unique here is you may have cars lined up with people standing there and not committing the offences, which makes it then difficult to be able to do anything with them, while the illegal activities happening further down the road, which we can't get to because, of course, the roads are rather blocked up full of people and cars.
So what I'm hearing is, yes, they're breaking the law, unlawfully assembling. A person's been stabbed, a police officer's been assaulted. So there's plenty of information there that says what they're doing is wrong. The action's happening up the road. So what you'd be saying is you don't have the resources to deal with the situation when it happens.
So what we're saying, it depends on the circumstance of the gathering. So if it's an event where people are simply lined up, like it's 99% of the time, watching what's going on further down the road, there's very little the police can actually do. That's not unlawful in itself. The unlawful part is the street racing activity, which is happening further down the road. So I say it depends on the nature of the behaviour of what's happening at the time. The circumstance I talked about earlier was certainly unlawful, which we closed the road, we sealed it off, and we dealt with the situation. But what we're looking for, and that was quite unique. What we're looking for is some other mechanisms, some other tools we can use. Is from a prevention aspect to stop things from escalating.
Okay, I suppose
the gathering of cars and people in itself isn't unlawful. If depending on their behaviour, if they're simply standing there, like 9 times out of 10, they are simply watching something happening, that's not unlawful in itself. There's no law to prohibit that whatsoever.
Okay.
Sorry.
So if we put yellow lines on the road to say they were parking illegally, that would be an officer's job to distribute a ticket, but the police would then come out straight away and deal with that because they're unlawfully parked.
Will certainly give us an extra option in carrying out some enforcement activity, and our commitment would be that would certainly use that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor McCullagh.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is to Julie. Just want to ask this question, and I understand that this is a hot topic, and it's not just a local topic, local issue. It's an international issue. I mean, Judith Collins got a name Crusher because of this thing. But given that Christchurch was considered a hot area for such activities, a few years ago, if you engage with colleagues, let's say from Christchurch City Council, to probably tease out certain options that we're probably not aware of, because I know that this was a hot topic for them, in the last 5-10 years or so.
I think you're correct. It was a hot topic in the 90s when I lived in Christchurch for a particular community location, and I think that's just continued around the country. We've engaged with as many, obviously put a request out to all councils for information about this, and engaged with a few particularly, not with all councils. Again, there's a resourcing restriction there as to how in-depth that could be. One staff person I spoke to who has been involved in the development of some mechanisms has suggested that the rules they have in place are as useful as a chocolate teapot. So I think that no council and no staff person and nobody who's engaged with me has said, we have the answer, this is what you do. I would note, for example, that infrastructure responses are localised. So if you have a gate or speed bumps or anything, then that will deter behaviour from that location. If you have some of the regulatory things in place, then they can be weaker and require, as has been pointed out, progress through the courts or other more long-term things to happen. So yeah, there's no really simple answer here, but we've done our best to engage with other colleagues, and I've had at least 2 other councils say, oh God, Palmerston North's doing something, you can tell us what to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. To Elliot and Julie, have you actually been to the sites and seen the sites that we're talking about at the moment at Vella Drive and Works Road?
I don't think we're paying Elliot that much to go and do site visits, but I shout out to Lex and Andy, who took me on a tour one rainy Sunday afternoon, and I've definitely spoken with some of the folk that came and spoke to us in October. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that concludes questions. Thank you to particularly all of the staff for the combined effort in answering questions. We are going to break now, and we will resume at 10:50. Thanks, everyone.